Hey, thanks for watching Vids. We're going to talk about connection strings. First, I'll do an example in a web application. Then we'll do an example in a console application. Let's begin. I'm here in Visual Studio, and I think people are just overcomplicating this. So we're going to show 3 quick examples. The first example is, as you can see here, I've got a web project, and we're going to use the connection string manually inside of a code behind. Very similarly, this would be the same in a controller. So in my case, I go to Pages, I'll go to the index CSHTML, and I look behind at the code behind here. This looks very similar to controller. If you're doing MVC, you're going to have this same injection kind of set up here. In both cases, for this example, we're going to go to appsettings.json. We're going to add another element at the bottom here. So after allowed hosts, if you just kind of created a new project, you can add a comma, put your quotes, and choose connection strings. If it's not there, you just type it, colon. Got your curly braces there. And in here, we're going to specify production and development. You can use your quotes there. I just like to use capital DEV. My connection string 1, and then put a comma, another space, and do production or prod, my prod string. And let's go ahead and put some realistic values in there now. So I've got a connection string here, and you can probably get it from SSMS, or you can go to the connectionstrings.com and just kind of figure it out, because you're not all going to be using SQL Server. You're not all going to be using trusted connections. Some of you might have SQL Server authentication. But basically, you put your connection string there. And then just for giggles, I'll go ahead and put in a production one here. It kind of shows you how I built my connection string. Since I'm using trusted connection, I just put in my database name, server name, etc. Okay, so let's go back to our code behind, or if you're doing MVC, your controller. This actually works similarly with a service, but if it's a service, you got to register it in startup.cs. And we're going to add another read-only property here. So I'll do private read-only I configuration, and I got a Control Z because of the autocomplete configuration. And now let's do control dot on the underlined here and say using Microsoft.extensions.configuration. And now let's complete the injection by putting it into the parameters of our constructor here. So we'll do I configuration, and then here we can do this dot configuration equal to configuration. And now down here we can assign our property. If you're like me, you don't want to have to pull it out of the config file every time you use it. We'll just put a string up here, private string connection string. Okay, and we can do equal to configuration dot get connection string, and now you just specify dev or prod, and it is just that simple, guys. All right, so if I put a breakpoint here and I run my web app, okay, there we are. Now I could hover over connection string, and as you can see, can't zoom in on that, but I'll zoom in on the IDE. It did get what we needed. It got out that north wind connection string that I had. But now it's up to you to use this. It's not in context or anything like that. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to putting this in context, getting it out from there. Now I'm going to do something you've probably seen in a bunch of my other videos, so go through it as quick as we can. We're going to install the Entity Framework packages so I could build any framework context using this connection string, also pulling it from that config file. All right, let's go through it real quick. So we're going to do add, or actually manage Nuget packages, and just search for browse Entity Framework in Framework Core. And we'll just start installing our packages real quick. So I'm installing Entity Framework Core, the latest I accept that. We'll go ahead and install design, any framework core design, tools, and then SQL Server. Blah, 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 any framework core SQL Server. Accept. Excellent. Now let's go ahead and go over to the startup.cs. Going over to startup.cs, we're going to add a few lines in configure services, but real quickly we need to scaffold some sort of a database if you're doing database first. Here we are. So what I've got here is scaffold-dbcontext, and then I give it a space, and then I give it in quotes the same connection string that I have in my config file. Now don't worry, putting it here is going to put it in a file, but we're going to remove it from there so that it doesn't end up in source control. Then you give it a space, and you put in your namespace that you're going to use for connecting to the database. In my case, it's Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.SQL Server. Then a space, you could do -output dir and the folder in which you want the models that it generates to be placed into. So we're going to go ahead and do this, and then we're going to deal with where it pulls the connection string from at runtime so that we don't have to worry about it anymore. One quick thing that I wanted to zoom in and show you here is if you've copied your connection string from your app config from earlier in this demo or in this tutorial, you'll notice that there's a double backslash there for the application to escape it out. You don't need that here. It's going to confuse it. Take one of those out. All right, now we can run it. All right, you should notice now you've got a folder called DB models or whatever you named your output directory in your command there, and it's got all the tables from your database in there. That's not what this video is about, so let's go ahead and scoot on down to the startup CS. I do have other videos on Entity Framework. Just go to my channel homepage and click on the videos and you'll find those. So going now to the context file that it created, it's going to be in this folder, Northwind context. Go ahead and get that name, put it in the clipboard, and head over to startup.cs. Configure services right above your Razor pages. If you're doing one like mine, if it's MVC, it'll be a little different. But right above that, you're going to go ahead and put in something like this, services.addDBcontext. And here, you'll paste in the name of your context. So in my case, it was that Northwind context, and I'll have to control dot to add the models that were folder that was generated, that namespace, to this class, so we'll know where it's at. And I'm using SQL Server, so I've got to include the Microsoft.entityframework core. And right here now, all we've got to do is put dev or prod. Save it, and now we've got that available to us. Go back to your page or your code behind, however your app is set up, and we can add another injection here. So we can do private read only. Next word that comes here, you got to go back to your startup CS and you can just copy it straight from here. So again, Northwind context, and I could say this is my DB context. And you have to control dot on that using the namespace that we had it for. And now we've got to put it into our constructor here. So once you get a lot of them, I just do like that and press return, bring it down on a line there. I know we're getting way far in the weeds for just a connection string, but I wanted to show you that it works. So go ahead and put your Northwind context here as well, DB context here as well. And down here, just the way we did with configuration, we'll do the same. This dot DB context equal to DB context from the parameter. And down here in your get method, you can use that context. You can do var my result equal to DB context dot, and then name one of your tables. And I did add using system.link to the top here so that I could do first or default here. I'll go ahead hit F5. Hit F10, get past my breakpoint there. If I hover on my result, you can see it pulled the value chai and product ID 1 out of the database. So it is getting the connection string from where we wanted it, and I went ahead and deleted it out of my context class where it was generated. You'll want to do the same. That way you don't get passwords into source control. So now you've seen two different ways to store your connection string. Well, one way to store it and two different ways to pull it out. One using context and the previous example, which was just to pull it out using the I configuration. Time for the console application. So close all your files, minimize your project, and we'll add a new project. Add new project, choose console application, and we're going to add a few Nuget packages to it right off the bat. In this example, we'll add a connection string the easy way to a console application using injection. Again, in .NET Core, Dotnet5. Just call it console app, blah, 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 create. All right. So right click on console application. We're going to go to manage Nuget packages. All right, go ahead and click on browse. Make sure in the top right your package source includes nuget.org. And we're going to search for microsoft.extensions.configuration. Click on that, install the version that you want or the latest version. Okay, now we're going to look for microsoft.extensions.configuration.json. Actually, we need file extensions and we need JSON. Let's do file extensions first. Microsoft.extensions.configuration.file extensions. Then Microsoft.extensions.configuration.json. In my case, I'm choosing version 5.00 for all of these. Next, click on your project. Right click, go to Add, New Item. We're going to search for JSON, JSON. Choose JSON file. And we're going to call it appsettings.json. Now you'll notice it already has some curly braces. That's good. Why don't we go back to our web project, because I'm just going to copy and paste it in there because it's going to be the exact same as this one. So connection strings, we'll take that whole group and you can put it in here inside those curly braces that are already there. These curly braces, and save it. Now in case you guys just fast forwarded to this part of the video because you're not interested in web project connection strings, it's very simple. We've just got double quotes here, connection strings inside that, colon, and then we've got our two different connection strings. You don't need to have both. You can just have dev if you want. Now, one thing that's different for the web projects is that we've got to tell it that the app settings needs to be copied to the bin folder when you build the project, because by default it's not. So right click on it, go to properties, and make that a little bigger. And by default it says copy to output directory, do not copy. Just double click that, and now it says copy always. Done with that step. All right, let's go back to our program CS, and let's build a static out here. We'll do public static I configuration. And we've got to bring in that, so control dot, and we're going to be using Microsoft.extensions.configuration. All right, now let's assign that a value, and then we'll pass it into a class to actually do some data access. Inside your main here, we could do var my builder equal to configuration builder, our new configuration builder, I should say. All right, and then we can do here dot set base path, and we can do directory dot, and we'll have to do control dot on that again. Bring in a reference using system.io. Now we can do get current directory, and what's going on here is it's going to get the directory of that appsettings.json. Okay. All right, next line, we're going to do add JSON file. I'm going to tell it the name of that file, which I think we said was appsettings.json. And as you can see in the IntelliSense here, it wants to know if this is optional. It is not optional. We want to know, do we want to reload it if the file changes, if the JSON file changes? Yes, we do, just in case, right? All right, so we can close that statement out now. And let's go ahead and assign our configuration. So let's say configuration equal to mybuilder.build. Excellent. Now you've got your configuration available here. All we have to do with that is pass it in to wherever we're going to access the database. So what you could do is you could say my data layer, say we build a class called that, equal to new my data layer, or data accessor, or whatever. Pass in that configuration, and we can control dot on this and generate class in a new file. Let's call it my local data layer, and then we'll do my data layer dot, let's say, get data, and bar result equal to that. And then we can put a breakpoint here to see if we've got our results out. I'll generate that method. I think by now you've already got your connection strings. You might not still be watching, but just in case you are, we'll access the data a little different from the previous example. So I'm going to hit F12 on that to go to our new class. As you can see, it's already got the private variable set up for you, and it's passed it into the controller because we just generated all that with the control dot. Very helpful Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and connect to the database here and get some data out. You can use SQL connection, you can use lots of different things, but since we did Entity Framework in the previous example, why don't we use Dapper here? Go ahead and open your Nuget command line, Package Manager console, on which you prefer to call it. And we're going to do install-package space Dapper. You can also browse for it the way we installed our previous packages. You can also install packages from the PowerShell now with the .NET CLI command line interface. All right, so Dapper's installed. So in this example, we're going to be getting data from a table that has lots of columns, but I only need data from 3 columns. So I'm going to create a small model here, and you probably are going to have folders in yours, but I'm just going to create a class. We're going to call it employee or customer or whatever, and let's make it a public class, and we'll do prop tab. Let's do string, and these properties need to match the columns exactly in Dapper. So let's do last name, we'll do first name and title. Just imagine this being a table with lots of columns because that's what it's going to be, but we're only wanting 3 of them, so we're only going to bother to build 3 properties. No point in collecting data that we don't need and putting that into memory. So we've got a class called employee, and we're going to select into that using Dapper in my data layer right here. Go ahead and design your query. In my case, it's just going to be string query equal to, and you could put this in a resource file, you could put it in an XML file you read, and you could put all sorts of places. I'm going to hard code it just because this is a short demo, but let's do select top 10 star from employee. Okay, nothing fancy there. Let's do a using statement. Using var my connection equal to new SQL connection, and we'll pass in the connection string here, which could be configuration dot get connection string. And we've got 2 of them. We've got dev and prod. We'll do dev. And that'll be available for that block. You'll notice SQL connection is underlined in red. And if I control dot, it allows me to choose install package system.data.sql client. I'll do that. Find and install latest version. Excellent. Now, let's go ahead and put that data we get from this query into an object, get the data out of it, and return it. And let's do var results equal to my connection dot query. And if query doesn't show up in the IntelliSense like mine and control dot doesn't do anything, you might need to come to the top and do using Dapper. And if your Dapper is underlined in red like mine is, and you have query not resolved down here, so you can even start putting the parameters in, it might be because you installed your Dapper to the wrong project. So come down here to Package Manager Console, do install-package Dapper, but instead of choosing the default project, which is the first project we added, the web project, you can choose your console app. If all you're doing is a console app, you probably didn't have that issue. All right, so now Dapper is not underlined in red, and query is probably going to be understood. So put your sideways carrots there. If you got a good name for that, let me know. We're going to spell out the name of the class we just built, which is employee, because we're going to get a list or an IEnumerable result of employees, and we're going to put that into a list. So now put your regular parentheses. I'm going to tell it what the query is, which is going to be, we just called it query. And you can do dot as list, and then again, optional, because it'll probably figure it out if you don't do this, the sideways carrots employee, so it's going to be a list of employees, and then your brackets, and we are good to go. Now, because the var, the result is inside the using block, it may not be available outside it. So what I like to do is just kind of put it out here like this. I mean, you could return it in here, but if I do a list of type employee, and that's capital L there, my list, and you got to do control dot on list here using system collections generic, my list equal to new list. So it's an empty employee list. It's going to try to do this here. You might do a try catch around this. That way you could always return it. But it just depends on your application, because a lot of times people want errors to bubble up to the top layer so they know what the heck happened, and they might have a logger out there. So I'm just going to do it like this. My list. Oh, trying to make this bigger for you. And then we'll just return that. And that's going to make this list of employees. And we can go back to program CS. And now this is a list of employees here. And give that access using control dot to system collections generic. And I think we're ready to run it. So I'm going to save everything, Control Shift S. I'm going to right click on my console app, because there's two apps here, debug, start new instance. You'll see mine, I don't know if you can see that small print, especially not if you're on a phone, but it says Control plus equal there. I've set up a hotkey so that I could run applications, so I don't have to right click, debug, start new instance if I got two things running. Ah, this is interesting. Check this out. Invalid object name employee. This kind of goes to show no matter how much you know or how many times you've done something, the simplest mistakes will always get you the semicolons and the S's. I needed employees because that's the name of my table, not employee. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and run it again. Get to our breakpoint here. If I hover over results, there are 10 results because I selected the top 10. But there's only 3 properties in there because I only put 3 properties in my employee class. I'm very interested in making another Dapper video that's more in depth. If you guys are interested in that, let me know in the comments below and I will build that video. But for now, go ahead and look at the comments in this video. I'll have some shortcuts to fast forward if you wanted to see, just where I do just the connection string or just the entity framework connection or just the Dapper connection. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to making more videos for you soon. Have a great day.